والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue in our lesson in the book of Nur al-Idah by Al-Imam Hassan Ashrun Bulali Al-Hanafi in the Fiqh of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with understanding and tawfiq and hidayah. Ameen ya Rabbal Alamin. So we are still in the chapter on istinja in this particular book, and in our last lesson we spoke about the ruling of istinja. So we also spoke about istibra before it, to remove the remains of the urine in the private parts. And then comes the role of istinja, and we mentioned that in the Hanafi madhab, istinja is sunnah. So this is with regard to filth that is at the private parts. But if the filth goes beyond the private parts, if it is within the size of 1 dirham, it becomes wajib. Istinja is wajib. If it is more than 1 dirham, then it becomes fard. And I mentioned there is a difference between wajib and fard in the Hanafi madhab. Wajib is an obligation that is based on dalil that is dhanni, whereas any fard is based in dalil that is qat'i. Because when the filth goes overboard, then the place of the private part, that is not any istinja, that is izalatun najasa, and izalatun najasa is compulsory. To remove any filth is compulsory. But when it comes to removing filth at the private parts, this is something that is forgiven, and it is a sunnah that a person remove that filth. And this is one of the main differences between the Hanafi madhab and the Shafi'i madhab. The Shafi'i madhab we do not take into consideration with regards to whether istinja is sunnah wajib. We say it is wajib. We say it is wajib, even though the filth does not go over to other body parts. This is one of the differences. There are other differences which inshallah when we come into it, inshallah we will speak about it. So this is what we covered in our last lesson. So to continue from here, we will enter into the part where the author mentioned sunanul istinja. Number one, he said sunanul istinja, meaning sunnahs of istinja. So number one, he mentioned, he said, وَيَسْتَنْجِي بِحَجَرٍ مُنَقٍ, that a person, when he does istinja, he does istinja with a stone that is munaqi. Munaqi meaning a type of stone that is able to remove filth. Not any stones that are so soft that you are unable to remove anything by it. So it must be a stone that is rough. That is rough. That is qali'. In some books it mention qali'in, hajarin qali'in. It is a type of stone that has a rough surface where it can remove the filth. It can remove the essence of the filth. So that is why even nowadays when people when we look at the tissue paper that is invented, the tissue paper has a level of roughness. So it is not the same tissue paper and toilet paper and normal tissue paper. What is the difference between toilet paper and normal tissue paper? You will find that toilet paper there is a rougher surface that you do not find in the normal tissue, tissue paper. Why rough surface? Because the fact that roughness plays a part in removing any filth. And so then we mentioned nowadays our fuqaha in all the madhab, not necessarily in the Hanafi madhab and the Shafi madhab, they regard the invented tissue paper it takes the place of stones, based on analogy, based on qiyas. So today when we speak about stones we speak about toilet paper usually, or tissue paper, or anything that has the function of such. So the author mentioned it is permissible to use stones, but he said wal ghuslu bil ma'i ahab. But if you compare using stones and water is better. Water is better. The same in the madhab of Imam Shafi, and we also mentioned about this that a person has a choice whether to use stones or water. But of course, if he has the choice, it is better for him to use. It is better to use water, but the best is to use both. This is where the author mentioned number 2. He said, "Wal afdalu al jam'u bain al ma'i wal hajar," is to combine water and stones. Fayamsahu thumma yaghsilu. Yani he begin with the stones and wiping with the stones, then only he begins with washing. So this is number 2. Number 3, he mentioned وَيَجُوزُ أَن يَقْتَصِرَ عَلَى الْمَاءِ. It is permissible that the person only use water. أَوِ الْحَجَرِ, or only stones. وَسُنَّةُ إِنْقَاءُ الْمَحَلِ. And the sunnah in istinja is to make sure that the place is clean. What place? Yani the private parts. The private parts. Then we make sure that there is no more traces of filth. And this is a sunnah. The author mentioned this. This is a sunnah. Number 4, وَالْعَدَدْ فِي الْأَحْجَارِ مَنْدُوب. It is a sunnah to make sure that we use odd number of stones. Odd number of stones. Because the Prophet ﷺ love odd numbers. The Prophet ﷺ love odd numbers. So even in istinja, it is a sunnah that we close with an odd number of stones. La sunnatun mu'akkada. It is not based on an emphasis in sunnah. فَيَسْتَنْجِي بِثَلَاثَةِ أَحْجَارٍ نَدْبًا. It is a sunnah that he uses 3 stones. And this is a sunnah. إِنْ حَصَلَ تَنْظِيفُ بِمَا دُونَهَا. Even if just by using less than 3 stones, that a person can cleanse the part. Even so, it is a sunnah to add more to it, to such an extent that a person closes it with an odd number of stones. So 3 is the minimum. 3 is the minimum. So he used 1. Then after stone number 2, for example, the place is clean. Then it's sunnah for him to add one more, so that it becomes 3. In the madhab Imam Shafi'i, it is wajib. That's what we study in Safinatul Najah. That minimum when you use stones, it must be 3 stones, no exception. But here in the Hanafi madhab, it is permissible. It is permissible less than 3. Wa kayfiyatul istinja. Now the author mentioned the way of doing istinja. How does a person do istinja? And seriously, we are amazed by the Hanafi Fiqh in this regard. And when we look at the Sheikh Sharon Bulali, the author of this matan, he goes to very detailed explanation on how to go about doing istinja. And this is amazing. This is amazing. We will see why. Number 1, he mentioned أن يمسح بالحجر الأول من جهة المقدم إلى خلف. So he mentioned now the case a person is using a stone. So how does he start? So he said من جهة المقدم إلى خلف. So he start from the front to the back. From the front to the back. He wipes the opening of the private part. The opening of the private part. Be it the qubul or dubur. So we start from the front to the back. From the front to the back. This is the first stone. The second stone, we do the opposite. From the back to the front. So you cover all the corners. You cover, when you start from the front to the back. And then from the back to the front. So you remove the excess filth at the corners of the front and the back. This is the wisdom behind this. وبالثالث, number 3, and we go back to the front again. من قدام إلى خلف إذا كان الخصية مدلاتا وإن كان غير مدلات يبتدئ من خلف إلى قدام. So now when the author says that number 3 goes back front to back, but there is a condition. For men, men have testicles. Men have testicles. So some people the testicles, what you call it, is long. Meaning long and towards the ground. Some people testicles are intact. Why does the author speak about this? Because if there is a possibility that if you use it from the front to the back, the stones you wipe from the front to the back, if there is a possibility that you might what you call it, hit the testicles, and then it becomes najis. It becomes mutanajis. Then you have to wash with water. So it is better that a person do from the back to the front to avoid hitting the testicles. Now, Then the author and he mentioned وَالْمَرْأَةُ تَبْتَدِئُ مِنْ قُدَّامٍ إِلَى خَلْفٍ. The same for a woman. She begins from the front to the back. خَشْيَةَ تَلْوِيسِ فَرْجِهَا. And again this is to prevent the filth what you call it, to smear on her private part. So she begins from the front to the back. Then the author and he mentioned dalkul mahal bilma. Now he speaks about a person using water. So before this a person using stones. So using stones we use 3 stones, front to the back, back to the front. Nowadays we use toilet paper. Now same thing. Front to the back, back to the front. Toilet paper is easier because the filter is more intact rather than stones. At the same time you must be careful. The filter should not be hitting any other body parts. So that is where he mentioned about the testicles and especially the hips and all these things. So that the filth does not hit any other body parts, because otherwise using water becomes fard, becomes compulsory. Izalatun najasa. So now he goes on to speak about using water. So now if a person use water, he said ثُمَّ يَغْسِلُ أَوَّلًا يَدَهُ بِالْمَاءِ. The first thing before he begins his istinja, he wash his hands. Wash his hands. ثُمَّ يُدَلِّكُ الْمَحَلَّ بِالْمَاءِ بِبَاطِنِ إِصْبَعٍ. Then he uses a finger to what you call it, to wipe the private part with water. With one finger or 2 fingers. With 1 finger or 2 fingers or 3 fingers in ihtaja. If he needs he or she needs 3 fingers, then use 3 fingers. And it is better to minimize. It is better to minimize. But otherwise he can add fingers. وَيُسَعِدُ رَجُلُ إِصْبَعَهُ الْوُسْطَى عَلَى غَيْرِهَا. So as for men, he mentioned that he begins with the wusta. Wusta is the middle finger. Correct. This middle finger. Left hand. Tamam? Left hand and middle finger. So for the man, we begin with the middle finger. And if we need to use 2 fingers, then we use this binsir. Binsir is the next finger, not the index finger. And it is the binsir. That's what he mentioned. Summa yusa'idu binsirahu. Then if he needs have more fingers, he use the binsir. Wala yaktasir ala isba'in wahida. And he does not do only with 1 finger. He does not do only with 1 finger. This is in the case as what we mentioned. If a person needs to perform istinja to encompass the place of the private part, so that he is able to cleanse the place better. So this is pertaining to men. So he uses the wusta and the binsir. وَالْمَرْأَةُ تُسَعِدُ بِنْسِرَهَا وَأَوْسَطَهَا وَأَوْسَطَ أَصَابِعِهَا مَعًا إِبْتِدَاءً. But for women it is different. Woman, number 1, he mentioned uses the binsir and then the wusta together. What you call it, at the same time. He mentioned at the same time, khashyata husulil laddah. What you call it, so for woman the private part is different from the men. So using both fingers at the same time when she begins to clean the private parts. And also she has to take any precaution that she becomes aroused. This is what the author mentioned, khashyata husuli al-laddah. So by using this way and these fingers, this to prevent her getting aroused. Then the author speaks about al-mubalaghatu fi tandhif. So he said وَيُبَالِغُ الْمُسْتَنْجِي فِي التَّنْظِيفِ حَتَّى يَقْطَعَ رَائِحَةَ الْكَرِيهَةِ. مُبَالَغَةُ فِي التَّنْظِيفِ meaning to increase in the washing, to such an extent that the smell of the filth is removed. The smell is removed. So he say يُبَالِغُ الْمُسْتَنْجِي, the person who does istinja, sunnah to do mubalagha, to have any excess in washing, until he is able to remove the smell. وَفِي إِرْخَاءِ الْمَقْعَادَةِ إِنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ صَائِمًا. And it is a sunnah that he opens up the private parts, and this is done by squatting. If he is not in a state of fasting, then he has to be careful. Because why? Water that enters into the private part, then he will make fasting invalid. So that is why he mentioned in lam yakun صائمة إن لم يكن صائما. فإذا فرغ غسل يده ثانيا ونشف مقعدته قبل القيام إن كان صائما. After he finished washing the private parts, he washes his hands. He washes his hands second time. First time before he begins, second time after he finishes. وَنَشَّفَ مَقْعَدَتَهُ قَبْلَ الْقِيَامِ. And then before he stand up, after squatting, he washes the place of the private parts. After he wipes the place of the private parts so it becomes dry. If he is fasting, because why? There is a possibility if he does not wipe, the water that is on the private parts will enter into the private parts, and this will break the fasting. Although our scholars mentioned this is unlikely, but this is something for us to take into precaution. Wallahu alam bisawab. The next part he mentioned faslun fi tamami ahkamil istinja. Then we will speak about other rulings in relation to istinja. So today these are the things that we have learned on how you need to use stones, how you need to use water. When stones we start from the front to the back into the front. And then when it comes to washing, we use one finger or two fingers for men and for women. So these are some of the things that are mentioned by the author. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with understanding and tawfiq. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.